Now, verse 25, a very well known verse. For they exchanged the truth of God for falsehood and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. This verse really completes the thought begun in verse 18. I guess you could say that it retreads the ground Paul has already covered in a more succinct way. Coupled with verse 24, he says, therefore God gave them over. And this verse begins with this little relative pronoun that is probably better rendered who or whosoever, but the NASB renders as for. The idea is essentially the same. God gave them over to their own desires, those who exchanged the truth of God for falsehood. Now, not to make a terribly big deal out of this, but I think it's important. In the Greek, Paul attaches a little thing called an article to this word translated falsehood. An article functions the same way as the word the in English. It specifies, it concretes an idea. We have a tendency to do this in Romans, especially. The translators will ignore the article, they just won't translate it. But we want to be very careful with not translating the article. Notice that the article attached to truth is translated. The truth of God is exchanged in the Greek for the lie or the falsehood. It would seem to be that Paul has one specific thing in mind here. It's not God's truth and falsehood in some nebulous, abstract sense. It seems contextually that the humans, exchanged the truth of God as creator for the lie that which is not God is worthy of honoring as God, which is exactly what we see the woman doing with the fruit of the tree in the garden. That was part of the discussion back in verse 22 as well. So Paul ends this verse with a declaration of God's status of being worthy of the praise that the humans exchanged. So as we're tracing in broad strokes Paul's argument in the book, at this point he has essentially said that humans chose creation rather than the Creator, and as a result God gave them over to their desires, which is the plight the unrighteous are now in. Now, the obvious question that arises from this then is, how does one become righteous before God? How do the unrighteous become righteous? That question sits at the crux of the issue Paul is dealing with in the book, and we will continue looking at this more as we continue our study in the book.